The Artisan Earrings, the third video on patina, finish, and assemble. So these earrings have been fired and brass brushed and tumbled. And here I was considering the 22 gauge or the 20 gauge wire. Which one? I decided to use the 22 gauge. And then my challenge would be to find the drill bit that would be a good fit for the hole for the wire that I've chosen. And I took one that matched the wire the closest. I put that into my flexible shaft handhold and drilled the holes out. My flexible shaft has two directions, so I made sure that the set direction was the right one for the drill. There was hardly any resistance at all when I drilled, which told me I could have easily drilled by hand, or that the holes really didn't need drilling after all. Perhaps I could have simply reamed out the holes with a wire or a needle tool. And I took some wire and I tested to see if it would fit in the hole. I took a scrap piece of 22 gauge and tried it, and a straight piece would have gone in a lot easier. But still the fit was good and there was not a lot of wiggle room, which I liked, so I cut some wire from my spool. This wire happened to be 22 gauge Argentium silver wire. I began to gather everything that I was going to incorporate into the earring and therefore patina. I used a different chain for each pair of earrings, so I got all my chains ready. One chain was already patinaed, if you can tell. And in case you were wondering, the reason for the X is so that I can center the camera for videoing. But here was the challenge at this part. Pebbles are never the same size, and one of these pebbles was fatter than the other. This meant one of these earrings would have more space, and that's what made them artisan, unique. I figured out that I would use 4 little spacer beads, 2 per earring. And I put out some bead options and then chose these 2 for the reasons: 1, I had a lot of them, and 2, they seemed to be a better fit, being smaller and fatter. I would need to patina these 2. On the second pair of earrings, I chose red coral beads. I spent a good amount of time deciding how I was going to incorporate them along with their spacer beads in the earrings. Trial and error, until the earring gave me a feeling that I liked. I also intentionally used 3 of the beads, as an odd number of elements is more often more pleasing than an even number. Then I patinaed everything. I patinaed the earring part that I had made. I patinaed the chain, the one I showed before, and the other one I selected. I patinaed the wire and the silver spacer beads and part of the ear wires. More on the ear wires in a second. I have patinaed everything except the pebbles in the coral beads and the back part of the ear wire. Why patina the ear wire and only a part of it? I want the final finish on all these to be a soft matte, and I want all of the elements in the earrings to match. If you have ever made a pendant and patinaed and finished it and then hung it from a brand new chain, you may have noticed that they don't seem to fit together. So I always patina and finish all parts the same way: the chain, the O-rings, the wire, the beads, ear wires, and more. Because the matte finish leaves the surface a little rough, I avoided roughing up the part of the ear wire that would go into the ear, just for ease and comfort. So the high shine part of the ear wire is behind the ear and does not show anyway. After the patina, I finished as much as I could with the red bristle discs on the flexible shaft. I have learned that I can better see what I've done with these bristle discs if I turn off any lights that are shining directly on my piece. Ambient light is better. I tried not to touch the disc screw to my piece because that always puts a nice big nick in whatever I'm working on. If I didn't have a flexible shaft, I could use 3M sanding sponges. A fine would work well. And I actually prefer the 3M finish, but I am pretty spoiled using the flexible shaft. So my solution to this then is to do each piece with the bristle disc and then come back and hit the more visible parts with the 3M sponge. The sponge works best in short, brisk strokes. And you can always save your hands and place your piece on a hard surface and use the 3M on that. So, can you see any difference between the bristle disc one and the 3M one? To me, this one looks a little rougher. The beads were easily finished all together on a wire. I left them on the wire that I patinaed them on, and I again used the bristle disc. You can sandwich them between two fingers and do them all together, and you can also rough them up with your 3M sanding sponge. Chain used to be the most challenging for me. I used to try to use the bristle discs, holding the chain cautiously tight, because if the chain is loose, the spinning flexible shaft just eats it up and most likely breaks it. So to finish my chain these days, I hold one end and wipe the chain with a 3M sanding sponge. I would use the 3M sanding sponge on the wire in the same way to remove patina. All this finishing is good to do before assembling your earrings, and you can do some more finishing when your earrings are complete, as you will see. Wait, I remembered. I left the parts by the string kind of rough, so here I am cleaning those up with an Advantage polishing disc. You could use again an emery board or a silver file here and do the same. Just smooth enough so that nothing catches and there are no bumps. Like I noticed on this earring there was a little bump, so I touched that up with the Advantage polishing disc, and then I roughed them up again with the 3M. Okay, now all my pieces were patinaed and finished with a matte finish. It was time to assemble the earrings. First, how many links I would use would determine how long my earrings were to be. On this pair, I held the chain in place and decided how many links might look good. It's always best to have, again, an odd number of components, even links on a chain. So I think I chose 7 or 9 links. I can't recall. All these earrings are merging together at this point. Why would I want 2 pieces of chain instead of one continuous piece of chain, and then hang that chain by the middle link on the ear wire? So here's my thinking. I wanted to spread the weight of the earrings out. If I used one piece of chain, then all the weight of that earring would be hanging solely on one link. If I used 2 sections of chain, the weight of the earring would be hanging on 2 links. Having it hang just on one link made me nervous, because I thought that in time that link would wear out, wear through, and break. That's why. So now I had all my components laid out at the ready: earrings, wire, spacer beads, chain, ear wires, pebbles, and coral beads. If you consider the earring that you are making, the steps will unfold naturally. Here is a breakdown just in case. It helps to work with straight wire, so I had to straighten the end of this piece. Then I bent one end at about a 45-degree angle, about a ½ inch or more from the end of the wire. Then I took a round nose pliers and bent the tail into a loop. Now the first time I did this, the tail was way too short. So I cut that off and I began again. And this time my first 45-degree angle bend was at least an inch from the end. And then I took my round nose and made that loop again. Then I put an end link of one of the chain section in this loop. I can't tell you how many times I have forgotten to add the chain because I got so carried away with the wire. Anyway, then I held the loop in one pliers. I usually use my bent nose on this one, and took another pliers and twisted the tail, the short end, around 1, 2, 3 times. Why did I count the loops? because I wanted to make the same number of loops on each side of the earring. I wanted 3 turns on each side. So here is where I am at in the assembling. I had the earring, I had a wire with a loop on one end, and in that loop I remembered to add the chain, and I wrapped the wire 3 times on this end. Now I needed to put that long end of the wire through one hole in the earring so that I could add the beads. Remember how you want your earring to look, how you wanted to orient the beads with regard to the earring. For example, I wanted the largest bead toward the side of the earring with the solo stamped circle, and the round bead I wanted on the side with the 3 stamped circles. This will become even more important when you assemble the second earring. When the components are added, the beads and spacer beads, I then put the end of the wire through the second earring hole. This may be a little challenging because you most likely are tight on space. At this point, you will know if you have enough wire or not, so always begin with more wire than you think you'll need. Then I used a pliers to bend that end about 45 degrees. This bend should be the same distance from the earring as the other side of the earring, about 3 wire wraps away from the earring. And I used the round nose pliers and made a loop of the same size as my first loop. I actually have a notch in my round nose pliers to be consistent on the size of my loops. Then I added the chain again, don't forget. Then I held the loop with the pliers and wrapped the wire again 3 times around. Then I cut the wire at an angle and pressed that tail flat against itself. I squared up the loops, which means I made the loops face the same direction. So this graphic shows one loop at an angle to the other, which is really what you don't want. Now to add the ear wire. I find it easier to put the earrings on the ear wire while everything is upside down. So to do this, first I put everything down on my bench how I want them to look. This meant I have both fronts or backs up and the ear wires pointing in the opposite directions according to the stamped designs and the beads. As you can see, these almost finished earrings were complementary. The front of the ear wire is toward the front and the front of the earring is toward the front, and they are mirror images of each other. So this then is how I added the ear wire. I picked up the earring part first. The front was to my left. Then I picked up the ear wire with the front to my left. I held the ear wire and put the chain on how it should sit. I figured out in the process that, the first chain that goes on is the front chain. Then I turned it over and grabbed it before the links slipped off, and I secured it first and then made sure that the O part of the ear wire was secure. Despite my best intentions on this pair, I put the second earring together wrong, and I simply had to redo it the right way. Now I have the earrings assembled. Notice how the earrings hang in line with the ear wire, but how would they hang on the ear when they were worn? So I tried them on, and if I didn't like how the earring hung, I could have tweaked or bent the O part of the ear wire so that it hung how I wanted it to. When I tried them on, I realized that the front of the earring hung lower than the back, and I didn't like that, so I ended up turning them around on the ear wire. What a mess. I hung in there, just to tell you. Sometimes it gets a little complicated. You just have to keep going and hang in there. The last thing I did was put the red bristle disc back on my flexible shaft and polished the entire earring again. Hopefully this would remove all my fingerprints and make them look better. Remember to hold the chains tight so the bristle disc does not eat them up like this. This is what you don't want. And if this should happen, let go and let the mandrel take the earring, and this reduces any damages. And there you have your artisan earrings. I would love to see yours.